Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me again this evening. I thought tonight would be an interesting little topic. It's about Stoicism. It's something I've been reading more and more about recently. You'll probably find as I'm going through some things, there are some things you already practice, which isn't a bad idea. You could maybe start to build on a few things. But I'm going to, as I often do, I'm going to look at some of the key principles, what it is, but also look at what it isn't, and look at how it can be helpful to us. How it can, help with our personal development, how we deal with people, situations, and so on. So to begin with, Stoicism, it's a philosophy, and it's something that can help us to, as I say, manage difficult situations and so on. But it can also help us with like an inner strength. It can help us to build resilience, courage, things like that. And it's something, it's like anything else. It's something we have to practice. It's something we will get wrong a few times before we start getting it right, which is perfectly okay. I think we don't really learn unless we get things wrong. We have to make mistakes in order to grow. But just to give you a brief background, Stoicism is a philosophy that kind of began in ancient kind of Athens. It's since been, if you will, carried on by other philosophers throughout the ages, and it's a way of, as I say, cultivating like a tranquil kind of mind in the midst of chaos and so on. What it isn't, it's not kind of, you forgive the Star Trek reference, I'm a sci-fi nerd. It's not walking around a place like Mr. Spock. It's not caring about things. It's not that things don't bother us, but it's how we approach things. It's how we behave. It's how we think about things. It's how we respond rather than react, and so on. So, looking at some of the key principles, first one would be you focus on the things that you can control. Now, a lot of the things that cause us a lot of distress are the things we really can't control, the things that are not without our control, or are not within our control, rather. There are some things we really cannot control. We cannot, for instance, control other people. The most we'll ever do is influence them. The most we'll ever do is maybe motivate them or encourage them. But what we cannot do is change them. And if you think of it this way, look at how frustrating it is when people try to change you. They try to turn you into a version that they would prefer. The things that are not within our control are often the things, as I say, that can cause us a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. Stoicism is focusing on the things you can control. Now, there was a live stream I did. I think it might have been one of my very first ones. If you ever want to go and look at that, there were 3 questions that I went through to help with problem solving. Things like, the first question is, can I change it? And one of the, if you will, sub questions that come from that is it mine to change in the first place? So when we look at the things we control and the things that we can't, is it mine to control in the first place? Not necessarily a bad way of looking at it. If not, can I accept it? If not, can I just leave it alone? And all those questions lead into each other. So it's looking at the things we can control and the things that we can't. We can control ourselves. We can control our actions, our behavior. We can, I will look at this a little later on, we can control how we think, not what we think sometimes, maybe how we think about things. We can learn to respond rather than react. Now, in the case of a difficult situation, when someone's provoking you, for instance, the way I often put it is, if someone's trying to provoke us or trying to get some kind of reaction from us, if we react, they have control. But if we respond, we have control. Our response is a little bit more measured. So the first principle is looking at the things that you can control, sometimes having to accept the things that we can't. Second principle would be accepting the present moment, sometimes accepting things as they are. Now, thing about acceptance is, and I have talked about this before, but when we accept something, we're now free to change something. Even we accept something about ourselves, something we don't like. We accept that. We're not in denial. We're not kicking against it. We're now free to change something. Okay. And when we accept something, this is why I think a lot of us, and I include myself when I say this, one of the reasons we struggle with acceptance sometimes is it's not what we think it means. When we accept something, it doesn't mean we're okay with it. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean we approve. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Sometimes we're just acknowledging it is what it is. We are where we are. And when we accept it, as I say, we're now free to change something that is within our control. When we accept things in the present moment, like things could be difficult, we could be uncertain, we could be stressed, we could be anxious, we could be frightened, whatever it is, when we're acknowledging that reality, we can be a little bit more informed. We're paying more attention to what it is we're thinking, what we're feeling, and we can draw a little more on our resources. We can think of what supports might be available. We might even be able to think, again, is this mine to change in the first place? Or can I just allow it to go? Can I let it go? I'm going to look a bit more at letting it go later on. What it does, start that again. See, this is the thing about doing a live stream in court as opposed to doing a video. I can't edit. It takes self-discipline. Like anything we do, anything we try, takes a bit of self-discipline. It takes a bit of practice. It's like someone who says, I want to get fit. I want to, go to the gym, build a bit of muscle, or start running. I want to get fit so that I could run a marathon or do something. I want to look good. I want to feel good. That takes self-discipline. We don't necessarily get up the next morning and off we go, do a marathon or something. It takes self-discipline. What we have to do is a little piece at a time. We might start taking brisk walks. If you, like me, you haven't ran for years, you might have to start doing brisk walks. Then you start jogging, and that jog might just be for, I don't know, half a mile or something. So you start to build up day by day, but that takes discipline. If we don't see instant results, sometimes we can talk ourselves out of it, but we have to pay attention to the small incremental changes. Sometimes that self-discipline as well might mean us having to tell ourselves no. Again, the example I'm using, if you're trying to get fit, pizza's really nice. Who doesn't like a bit of pizza? But if you want a bit of pizza, you know that you're probably going to set yourself back a bit, so you're having to look at your diet and a lot of other things. You're having to cut out maybe junk food, chocolate, things like that, in order to be able to move forwards. And that takes self-discipline. You understand as well that a lot of the situations we're in, a lot of the things we feel, a lot of the moods we have, a lot of them are of the moment. They are transient. They're for the here and now. They could be situational. If I feel angry or upset, it doesn't mean I'm going to feel like that for the rest of my days. It is in this moment. It is whatever has brought that on, whatever that has triggered in me, or whatever cues have happened externally. They're the things that are maybe impacting on what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling right now. Accepting things being transient. You could be in a job that you don't really like. What was that? I've just seen a thumb appear on the screen. I never touched the thing. Ooh, that's scary. Sorry about that. I'm getting distracted, as I always do. Yeah, we're in a job. We don't like it. We're not getting paid much. The people there, we don't get on with them. But we recognize that is of the moment. It is giving us money. We're able to pay bills. What we could be doing, we could be updating our CV. We could be learning new skills. We could maybe enroll in a class in order to get another job. We could be doing those other things. The fact that we're in a job we don't particularly like, we don't feel stimulated, we don't feel challenged, we don't feel we're getting anywhere. It doesn't matter how hard we work. That is of the moment. That is not us for the rest of our lives. We're not in that situation forever. So things are not always permanent. Sometimes something may happen and it is permanent. It may leave some kind of permanent mark, if you want to call it. That doesn't necessarily dictate the rest of our lives. We can learn different ways. Something I'll be looking at later on is our ability to adjust, to adapt, to overcome, to navigate through. When we acknowledge that things are subject to change, even if something is really going good, going really well, things are subject to change because things sometimes happen. They just might, what's the expression? Life has a tendency to throw a curveball at you once in a while. Not everything's ever going to be perfect. Not everything is going to go our way. But even then, that is of the moment. That's not necessarily the rest of our lives. When we recognize that, we can approach those challenges, those difficulties. We can approach them in a more balanced way. like I said earlier on, what we can do is we can look at our resources, our experience, our skills, whatever support there might be around us. If there isn't any, we see if we can find some. We tap into our own sense of, as I say, our own sense of resourcefulness. We're not necessarily stuck in that moment. And just because, again, things might be great, you're on holiday, but there's that day that it rains awful, that doesn't necessarily mean the whole holiday is ruined. That was maybe an afternoon, or that was a day. Going back to the control. Looking at the things we have control over and the things that we can't control. We can control our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, and things like that. We look at other people, we cannot necessarily control them. So in the situation where we have someone, and maybe they're difficult, maybe they're toxic, we recognize the things that we can do. Now, the example I would use would be someone who maybe says something, you're doing something, it could be something in your best interest, you've enrolled in a course, or you want to apply for another job, or you want to do something, and for whatever reason, they're trying to talk you out of it. They don't like it, they feel uncomfortable, and not because it's not in your best interest, but because maybe they're envious or something. They would prefer you to stay as you are. And they're saying things to you like, if you don't quit doing that, if you don't leave that course, or if you don't get rid of that application form, that's it, we're finished. I will never talk to you again. Now, when we hear something like that, we might be thinking, well, oh my goodness, it must be really bad. It must be really harsh, that this would bring up so much in them. And then we start to think we're narrowing, if you will, our options. We're thinking it's, if I do this, that'll happen. And if I do that, that'll happen. Being able to recognize what's in our control and what isn't. We have no control over other people's actions. Now, depending on the situation, I'm not advocating you ever say this, because sometimes people take things the wrong way. Things might not go the way we choose. But you recognize if that person doesn't speak to you again, that is their choice. You have not made it for them. That is not within your control. That has been their choice. Okay, so that's looking at, as I say, the things we can control, the things we can't. Other people making threats like that, we have no control over what they're going to do next. When we focus on what we can do, as I say, if you don't speak to me, that's your choice. When we focus what we can do, we can lower the anxiety, we can lower frustration, we can lower all of those other things. We can also think a little bit differently. Because we may be faced with, just like that person who's saying, I will never speak to you again. We could be thinking, the expression, it's hard to think outside of the box if you don't know you're in a box in the first place. That's someone giving us options. We have many more options. We can think of the bigger picture. And a little technique that I use, if you want to find this helpful, sometimes I lift myself out of it and I look at it as if I'm on the outside. I imagine it's a friend, or I imagine it's somebody in a book or a TV show, and they're faced with the same situation I'm faced with, and I'm just wondering, what do I think they should do? What do I think their options are? When we're looking at it from the inside, it can feel like as I always say, it's like we're looking through a tube or something. We see very, very narrow, kind of restricted. When we look at it from the outside, we're removing that tube. We can see the bigger picture. We can see options, choices, resources. We can see the bigger thing. So it's just finding those different little ways to help ourselves to think about things differently. Okay. When we're also doing it, sometimes it's not that we don't feel something, but what we're doing is we're trying to take the emotion out of it by stepping out of it. Sometimes the options we have may be difficult ones, they may be painful ones, but they're better than none at all. Also, even if something is difficult or painful, remember what I said about nothing being permanent. Something may be difficult, something may be painful. However, in the longer term, it might have a far better payoff. We may be better off. We might have that moment's discomfort, that day's discomfort, whatever it is. Only this noise is making strange, or this room is making strange noises. Maybe I'm haunted. Ooh. There goes my mind wandering again. Anyway, on to the next bit. So they are the principles of Stoicism. So as I say, there's focusing on what you can control. You look at the control you have, the internal control, the things like your responses and so on. You accept things are in the present moment, but you also acknowledge that nothing is permanent. And you look at the difference between the things you can control and the things that you can't. We often have more options than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. I would go further and say we have more options than people give us sometimes. Okay. So in the context of difficult situations, what Stoicism, what practicing Stoicism can do is it can give us, and I've talked about this previously, it can help us with an emotional resilience. Okay. Now, resilience is not just our ability to bounce back. Resilience is our ability to navigate through things and around things. It's our ability to be able to persevere even when things are difficult because we know it's going to be worth it in the long run. We can listen to our emotions. We don't necessarily have to allow them to make decisions for us. For instance, we could feel anxious. Now, anxiety is feeling uncertain. It's feeling a lack of control. Sometimes it could be feeling helpless. But when we feel anxious, we feel it for a reason. We pay attention to the reason, not necessarily the feeling itself. The feeling informs us. So if we're feeling uncertain, we look at what information do I feel is lacking? Well, I don't know the outcome from the beginning. Okay, so I can accept that because I can't predict the future. But I have a good idea how things will go. When we develop that kind of emotional resilience, we might try something and it might not work. We could feel disappointed, we could feel hurt, we could feel any number of things, but we're not necessarily crushed. What we do is we learn from that. What didn't work that I could rule out for the next time that I try? So it's really the emotional resilience. It's really looking at how we regulate our emotions. We allow them to inform us, not make decisions for us. If we feel fearful, we may feel fearful for a reason because there could be a real risk. There could be a real danger. So we pay attention to that. Is there a way to navigate through it or around it? If we're feeling angry about something, we could be feeling angry for a reason. Anger is our way of saying this is unfair, this is not right, this is not good enough, this has to change. It could be any number of things. We look at why we're angry, and then we could look at perhaps how to channel that anger in a constructive way, not a destructive way or not in an aggressive way. We can use it constructively. It can give us an energy to change what we need to change. The other thing it can help us with is, as I said earlier on, about the difference between reacting and responding. When we respond, we're a bit more thoughtful. We're a bit more measured. We're not reacting emotionally. We're not raising our voice. We're not shouting and we're not running for the hills. We can be a bit more measured. We can pay attention to what's actually going on, what that is bringing up in me. We can look at what fuels that. If I'll stick with anxiety, we could be looking what's fueling that. Again, it could be the fear of what happens. It could be the uncertainty. It could be, any number of things. It's not that we don't think about it. We look at how we think about it. Again, the little technique I use is just stepping out of it and trying to look at it from the outside. It could be a situation that's maybe in the past that keeps coming up, and we keep thinking that if I do this again, this is going to happen. That's what happened last time. We might recognize, well, there is a possibility that it could, but there's no evidence that it will. We could be looking at that thing we're ruminating over that might be holding us back, and rather than try to push it out of our head or ignore it, we can take control of it. Now, again, I think I talked about this, it was either on a video or a live stream, about how we do that. First of all, well, there's different ways, but the way I sometimes suggest, you give yourself a time limit. I'm going to think about it, but I will think about it for the next 2 minutes, next 5 minutes. Once that's done, once I've thought about it, set your stopwatch, whatever it is, go back to doing what you're doing, or think about how the best way or what the best way to do it is. We could also be thinking about the why. And when we keep asking why is one of those questions. It's a very important question, but it is one of those questions that I think takes us down a lot of rabbit holes. Because it could be because of this, it could be because of that. And what we're doing is, I think we're trying to fill in the blanks a lot of the time. We're also relying on someone else giving us answers that they might not give. They don't want to give us answers. They don't want to explain. So rather than asking ourselves why when we're thinking about it, we could be asking how. How did it happen? When did it happen? Where did it happen? When we're asking those questions, we're in a bit more control of the ruminating thoughts. When we're in a bit more control, there's less chance of us going down further rabbit holes and getting caught up more and more in anxiety and stress and talking ourselves out of doing some of the things that might be in our best interest. Another thing it can help with, and this is something, again, that a lot of people, I would include myself, can find very, very difficult. Going back to the accepting others. A lot of people watch my channel have been in very difficult situations, very difficult relationships. There's people who have been absolutely horrible to them. And we find that very hard to accept. It's hard to accept you've been on the wrong end of a horrible person, a toxic person. Something to help with that, I often say, there's no shame on having been on the wrong end of a horrible person, because all of us have at some point. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. We accept there may well be something wrong with them. We accept them as they are. Now, there's another YouTuber who I probably should be able to say who it was, but my mind has slipped. They said about toxicity in other people, what we do is we can't love it out of them. Well, I would agree with that, but I would add to it, what you can't do is you can't reason it, you can't plead it, nor can you argue it out of people. That's who they are, that's who they are, that's what they are. And we accept that that's what they are. They're not for us to change. If they want to change, that's up to them. We can't do it for them, and we can't do it to them. So we accept other people. They are what they are. And again, we don't have to like the things that we went through, the things it did to us, but we accept that it happened. Doesn't mean we like it, as I say, but when we accept it, we're now free to change. We can change something. We can go on to become a better version of ourselves. We can go on to become a bit stronger. We can go a bit more empathetic. We can become anything. What we do is, I often quote Jay Reed when I say this. Jay Reed is one of my favorite YouTubers. We start to live in defiance. We do not live our lives through their filter anymore. Okay, we start to live in defiance, but we accept them as they are. They are what they are. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. They would have behaved exactly the same. The last thing it can help with is our personal growth. We learn to grow, we learn to develop, we can build on our self-awareness, we can build on our confidence. Am I being invaded? Weird noises. Yeah, we start to grow, we start to develop, we can build on our self-awareness, we can build on our confidence. How we build on our confidence is, what we do is we start to do the things maybe we feel a little bit uncomfortable with, but we do it in short, measured little ways. And again, maybe our self-discipline comes into this. We expose ourselves to those things we're uncomfortable with. We start to take risks. Always have to be careful how I say this. Small, safe risks. Don't do anything crazy. Don't put on a cape and take up crime fighting or something, or shark wrestling, anything dangerous like that. Small, little risks. And the more we do that, you find your confidence starts to increase. We start to become a bit more courageous, if you will. We also, as we start to regulate how we feel, we can pay attention to what we feel. We'll say angry, we'll say anxious. No, we go that little bit further. I feel threatened, I feel devalued, I feel excited, whatever it happens to be. We can build on that awareness, and as I say, those emotions can inform us. As I said earlier, what we're not doing is we're not walking around like Mr. Spock, that we don't feel anything and nothing phases us. Of course we do. We're human beings. But those feelings inform us, nothing else. What you might find as you start to practice a little bit of stoicism, again, your personal growth, sometimes, and this is going back to the things that we change and the things we can't, sometimes we might actually start to influence the people around us. They might look at us a bit differently. They might start to treat us a little bit differently. Sometimes they might take us a little bit more seriously. Sometimes, oh well, fill in the blank. You start to notice how people around you start to act a little bit differently. And I think it's worth paying attention to that sometimes. There's a question that I would sometimes use if I'm practicing solution-focused work and I'm asking about change. And I would ask people, well, what needs to change? What would be different? And one of the questions I ask is, who would notice? What would they say? What would they see that's different? And they might see something different. They might bring out, they might notice a new level of confidence or something. They might notice you found your voice. You're being a bit more assertive. They might find you a bit more playful, a bit more relaxed, whatever. But it's just the little things. Now, they might say to you, and if they do, so much the better. But even if they don't, you pay attention to how they behave, because sometimes when we start to behave a certain way, we start to notice little changes in other people. So, Stoicism, I think of it is a philosophy, but I think it's a useful kind of framework for the way we approach things, for the way we approach our problems, our difficulties, even how we approach the people in our lives, how we deal with arguments, conflict, and things like that. We can be open to the possibility that we might be wrong sometimes. So we're prepared to listen. We're prepared to maybe try and get a new piece of information. But we can also stand our ground when we have to. When we know that we are in the right, we're maybe being mistreated or whatever, we can still be in the right. We can stand our ground, and we can do it without being aggressive, without being rude, without being nasty, without ending up like the people that treated us badly. It can help us with challenging situations as well, in the sense that it can help us navigate them. It's not that problems aren't going to come up. Of course they do. Life does that. Nothing, I'm being general. Not everything goes the way we would like it. And just because something doesn't go to plan doesn't necessarily mean we've failed or we're wrong. It just means maybe we have to try a different approach. So I'm going to give you some ideas that you might find helpful to practice Stoicism. Now, as I said earlier on, you might find there's things you're already doing. And I often say it's maybe looking at some of the things that we do and apply them to areas where we're not doing them so well. We look at our strengths and we take our strengths for what we do so well in one area, and how can that compensate for an area where I'm struggling. Pardon me. If you will, we start to become a little bit more creative. So some things that might help to develop a stoic kind of mindset or behavior or whatever is, to begin with, you just pick one thing that needs to change, something you would like to change, whatever that happens to be. And that could be getting fit, that could be learning a new skill, it could be anything. You pick one thing and you start with that. And you start with that in a small way. Just like I said earlier, if you want to get fit, what you don't want to do is enter a marathon first thing in the morning. It's going to be little small steps, and you keep measuring your progress. But in order to do that, and this is where your self-discipline comes in order to do that, you're going to have to build some kind of a routine. So it could be first thing in the morning. It could be when you get home from work. It could be in the afternoon during your lunch break. It could be anything. You just pick one thing and you start to build a routine. If you will, what you're doing is you're forming a new habit. And I often think the best way of breaking a bad habit is trying to form a new habit. So you start this new habit, you form this new routine around what it is you're doing. You give yourself permission to start something new, even if it seems like a monumental task and it looks like, you're having to climb Everest by lunchtime. That ain't going to happen. It might look like that, but you give yourself permission to start. And you start doing the little small things that you're going to thank yourself for as you go along. You also give yourself permission to quit something that's not helping you, something that holds you back. Now, that could be a bad habit, that could be procrastinating, that could be, if it's getting fit, it could be smoking or something. You have to give yourself permission to let go, to quit, to stop, whatever it is holds you back. Now, in order to do that, sometimes we'll cut ourselves a bit of slack, which isn't necessarily a bad idea. We can be compassionate. But other times it's like we sit there thinking, well, I would if it wasn't for. You can be stern with yourself. You don't have to beat yourself up, but you can be stern with yourself and gentle at the same time. Same way as we can with kids. Same way as we can with people we care about. We can be stern and gentle at the same time. That can help with our discipline. That can help with our own encouragement. That can help with us learning, recognizing the things that haven't worked, the things where we maybe slipped up, we fell into bad habits and so on. The other thing is, when I said about trying to quit, again, careful to say this because social support networks and things like that, look at the company you're in. Because sometimes you will be in the company of people who will encourage you. They will help you if you want to try something, if you want to do something. Then you will meet people who they might tease you, and it could be just playful banter, and that's fair enough. That tends to happen. But then you will also get people who will try to talk you out of it. The kind of people I always describe them as, they want you to look at your feet and aim for the floor. They don't want you to change. They prefer you as you are. You're maybe more controllable, or they're feeling good about themselves. They're feeling some sense of superiority. You look at the company you're in. There are some people you might have to let go of who maybe aren't good for you. If you can't, that's fair enough. Because I'm not saying you dump people you don't like. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what you do is you have to learn to manage them differently. Just like what I said earlier on, if you choose not to speak to me again, that is your choice. I cannot make it for you. You will be doing what you want to do. I am not making you do that. So you maybe have to manage them differently. But one way or another, we may have to let go of some of the people who just want us to stay stuck, who want us to stay easily controlled, who want us to react every time they poke us with a stick or whatever. So you look at the company you're in. There are people out there who will encourage you. There are people out there who, as much as they will encourage you, they'll criticize you, but not necessarily in a bad way. They might tell you that what you're trying to do is not a good idea. Maybe worth listening to. Why is it not a good idea? What you're doing might cost a lot of money, a lot of time. Maybe they've tried it and it didn't work. Could be any number of things. They're worth listening to. They're not trying to talk you out of it. They're maybe trying to advise you. And if they are trying to talk you out of it, there may be a good reason for it. It's difficult to discern, I guess. But you'll know the people you're with. You know how they generally behave. You'll know if they have your best interest at heart. It doesn't do any harm to try to meet new people, to get into new company, people who will support you, people who will advise you, people who will help you with your mistakes, your errors, your struggles, who will call you out if you're mistaken, but not in a horrible way. But ultimately, they're on your side, if you will. They're trying to encourage you. So you pay attention to the people that are around you. Something else you might find useful is something that happens to all of us to some degree is the fear of change. Sometimes we fear change. We like familiar. We like things that are familiar because maybe they seem easy. Again, question I sometimes ask is it easy, or does it just feel easy? Is it really easier, or does it just feel easier? Now, it's a question to ask yourself. Is it easier to stay where you are? It could well be. Or it could be just because it's familiar, the unknown. Once we're moving into the unknown, we're trying something different. Yeah, we're not sure how it's going to work. We don't know if it will work at all. We don't know if it'll get worse. Don't fear change. Change is, by the way, change is constant. It happens all the time. We change all the time. People change. How we look changes. Fashions change. Governments change. Laws change. Fashion, lots of things change. Change often happens, and sometimes it's something we have to adapt to and we have to keep up with. And that's not always easy, but we can do it. Quite often, we do it without even thinking. It's automatic. We're more adaptive than we think. Other times, change is something we have to initiate. But you have to be honest about what the change is. We have to initiate it, we maintain it, we sustain it. This is the thing about maintenance. I always say when we change something and we're maintaining that new habit or whatever it is, sooner or later it stops being maintenance. It just becomes the new normal. Just becomes more familiar with us, or we become more familiar with it rather. So we don't necessarily fear change. We can be cautious, but not necessarily fear it. And again, going back to our confidence, the things we do to build our confidence. When we become more confident, we start to become more courageous as well. So the more change we might be faced with, the more courageous we are to be able to face it, because we have learned what has worked and what hasn't worked previously. So we say no to the things that hold us back, things like the procrastinating, things like the bad habits, whatever they be. We also look at some of the people who might be holding us back. We either get rid of them or we manage them differently. The other thing to think about are the things that maybe waste our time. Now, I'm the biggest time waster you'll ever meet. The things that waste our time. We could be spending hours watching Netflix. We could be scrolling through social media. We could be finding things to do instead of the things that we really have to do. Sometimes we have to reduce those things. Now, we might not be able to stop them immediately, but what we do, just like the thinking, I will think about it for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. We have to tap into our self-discipline. I will only spend 5 minutes at this. I will only watch one episode of whatever. It's not stopping it completely, but it's reducing the things that hold us back and the things that stop us. So that is Stoicism. There's a lot of information out there. There's channels out there that deal specifically with Stoicism, the philosophy, and practices that you can do if you want to have a look at them. I can't think of any offhand. I was looking at a few during the week. I can't remember their names, but you will find them if you search for them on YouTube. There's websites as well that you could look at. That's Stoicism in a nutshell. That's Stoicism looking at the principles behind it, how it can help us with like an inner strength or resilience and things like that, how it can help us to navigate difficulties, problems, people, and just some ideas that might help you begin maybe on that journey of if you want to start practicing Stoicism. So what I'm going to do now, it's what I always do. Let's go back to the beginning, have a look at the questions. Is this the thing? I can't read questions and talk at the same time. I can't multitask. So, a lot of people saying hello. Hello, everybody. Freud and all. Hi, Paulie. Freud isn't actually up here tonight. Mostly he is. He usually lies on the floor beside me, but he's not up here tonight. He's down in the kitchen this evening. So I'll tell him you said hello. It's not a bit of a show. Where are we? Playing from the start on 2-speed to catch up. I must have sounded like a Smurf or something. Okay. Specialized in philosophies, people wonder what I go on about, and every change starts with yourself. Yeah. The change starts with yourself. And that, again, going back to that philosophy, it's you look at what you can control and what you can't. We have control over ourselves. We control our actions, our thoughts, our behaviors, all those things, all those interactions. So we start with what we can control. We start with what we can change. We can change aspects of ourselves. What we don't do is we don't necessarily change our core, but we can change aspects of ourselves. We can change our behavior. We can change our approach to different things. So, yeah. Paisley Jane says, hello, just dug into Stoicism out of curiosity, and wow, this is how I'm kind of living. Paisley Jane, yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. A lot of the time we find we are doing these things. And we do them in different situations. We might not do them all the time. We might do them with certain people. We might do them in work. We might do them in different situations. If you think of one of the things I would say earlier on, recognizing that things aren't permanent, things can change, so they can be situational. Yeah, we could be practicing these things, yeah, in a meeting at work or whatever. Go back to our own families. Yeah, maybe relax a bit more. Maybe we're a bit more whatever, you know. So yeah, we practice these. We do practice a lot of these things in different situations. It's worth recognizing that what you are doing in one situation, as I say, you look at what you're doing well there, and you maybe apply that to an area where you might be struggling, because sometimes it's the same thing. It just might need a little tweaking or something, or it might be a little adapting. But sometimes it's essentially it's the same kind of approach that we need. No Baloney Mahoney. What a great name. Listening from Burbank. Hello in Burbank. Okay. Yeah, no, you're right. Acceptance doesn't mean you agree with it. It doesn't mean you approve of it. It doesn't mean you're fine with it. It doesn't mean any of those things. And I think that's why a lot of us struggle with acceptance, because it's not quite what we think. It doesn't mean it's fine. Doesn't mean any of that. Just means we're acknowledging it is what it is. They are what they are. You know, sometimes that's all it means. Thought of the word as stoic as a negative connotation. Well, it's like anything. There can be a negative connotation. I guess it depends on how it's used. This is what I said earlier on. Being stoic does not mean we walk around with a poker face on us all the time. It doesn't mean nothing affects us or we don't care about anything. It doesn't mean we're, Vulcan, we're Mr. Spock. It doesn't mean we're emotionless. It can be used in the context, someone might say about somebody being stoic as if they don't care. They're not showing anything. They're not giving anything away. It's like anything else. There can be negative connotations, but it's how it's used. And I think sometimes it may be used incorrectly, as I would put it that way. You have to look for clues. The world does not give clues. Doesn't always. People often talk about red flags. Why did I not see the red flags? Well, there's two things I would say to that. The first thing is the person who's behaving in a certain way does not wave a flag in front of you saying, hey, look at what I'm doing. That's why we often miss them. What we look for is the second thing I would say is it doesn't always give clues, but what you do is you watch for repeated patterns of behavior. Sometimes that's the biggest clue. The repeated patterns of behavior. So the clues might not always be in our face. They might not always easily be recognizable, but when we start to recognize repeating patterns, we can be a little bit more informed. It doesn't mean we're right, doesn't mean we're mind readers, but we are a little bit more informed. Let me see. Will this matter in 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 days? Yeah, Susan, that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, it's putting things into context. We could be all day Sunday, we're walking around in circles in our head and we're catastrophizing the life out of something because something's coming on the Monday and we are terrified of it. Well, first of all, do you ever notice Monday comes? Does it happen? It doesn't always happen. But even if it does happen, do you ever notice it's very rarely the nuclear explosion we expected? So that question is a good one. You're worried about something on the Monday and you ask yourself, by Tuesday, even by the following Monday, am I still going to be worried about this exact same thing? Chances are you're not. A month from now, am I even going to remember it? Maybe, I don't know. A year from now, the thing I'm worried about, will it have mattered? Again, I don't know. It really depends on what it is. But they are very good questions for putting something into practice. And if you will, that's a way of practicing a bit of stoicism. You're putting something into a context by recognizing that the thing on the Monday is the Monday. It's transient, it's of the moment. By Tuesday, Monday's long gone. Okay. Mind, body, and spirit, strength of other people. Susan asks, so you're allowed to feel the upset but not show it. Is that stoicism? It can be. Think about what I was saying, the difference between a reaction and a response. We could react very angrily. We start to scream and shout, stamp our feet, stick our lip out, fold our arms, do all that sort of thing, throw a temper tantrum. We can react angrily like that, or we can respond angrily. We can be stern. We can be clear. We can be concise. We can be honest. So we're still being angry and we're still showing it. But what we're not doing is we're not being aggressive. So it's not about not showing it. Maybe it's about how we show it. Okay, where are we? Again, this jumps around all over the place every time I try to read something. Where are we? Modern usage of stoicism is more about personality, meaning resilience and calm acceptance. The opposite of this would be neuroticism, acute sensitivity to emotional disturbance. Sixth sense, Amelia. That's very profound. Yeah. The opposite would be neuroticism, acute sensitivity to emotional disturbance. The acute sensitivity can bring about that reaction, which is why sometimes we are in the company of people who do react. Everything's so damned unfair. Everything is rude. Everything is, don't fill in the blank. The stoicism, it's not that we don't feel it. We pay attention to what it is. We're able to regulate it. We understand why we're upset. We understand why we're angry, why we're frightened. We understand why. And we choose the best course of action, not necessarily the most expedient. People who are high in neuroticism struggle to deal with uncomfortable feelings, which is why they often react the way we do. And that's not, I wouldn't say there's anything right or wrong with that, but if you're on the wrong end of someone who is reacting very badly to feeling, feeling overly criticized or feeling whatever, even though that's not an accurate reflection of what happened, if they're reacting that way, it's not nice to be on the wrong end of that. The trick is getting them to listen. Well, it's like I said earlier on, it depends on the person, but there's some people you can't love it out of them, you can't reason it out of them, you can't argue it out of them. That's when we accept they are what they are. They're not for me to change. That change is up to them. Yum Num says, best way to get your point across is to embody the lesson you want to teach. Yeah, you be the change you want to see. The thing, people talking about changing the world and all that sort of thing. Back in my day, all right, going back a few years back during the 80s, a lot of people became the thing they wanted to see in the world. Nowadays, what you just get is people, waving their fists in the air and repeating slogans that they've learned. You become the very thing that you want to see. As I say, you pay attention to the people around you, because sometimes you'll notice changes in them. They might start to model you. They might start to maybe respect you a little more. They might start to loosen up a little when they're with you. You pay attention to the changes that come up in you. You pay attention to the changes in other people. Even if they don't say it to you, you watch them closely. Again, repeated patterns of behavior. You watch how they interact with you. Polly. Darren, there's a ghost for sure. Zoinks. Like, run, old buddy, old pal. That was my Shaggy impression. Good, isn't it? Where do we get to? God, my head goes all over the place.
Learning is not to care what other people think or say. There is an expression, and I do believe it was Oscar Wilde. I used to think it was my friend John, but then I found out it wasn't him. It was someone like Oscar Wilde. He used to say, what other people think of me is none of my business. I would go a little bit further. It's none of my business. Doesn't mean it doesn't affect me. Doesn't mean it doesn't bother me. But I have to accept that I cannot control what they think. Rule by your head or your heart. Reminds me of a quote Alfred Adler once said, follow your heart, but bring your brain with you. Where do we get to? Scroll down a bit. It's easy for someone to point when someone's being emotional, but then nobody asks what we're reacting to. Just the reaction is offensive. Yeah, reaction abuse. It's got a video. I do have a video on that. Yeah, the abused abuser, I think I called it. It's the thing about being emotional. Again, there's nothing wrong with being emotional. We are not machines. We're not machines. We do feel things. We have feelings. We have emotions. We have sensations. We have urges. We have all of that. It's not that we don't have them. As I say, we'd become like a machine or something, like a Vulcan or something. It's learning to manage ourselves. As I say, we learn to respond rather than react. We can still feel angry. We can still feel frightened. We can feel a lot of things, but we have control over our own responses in those situations. We can still be emotional. As I say, we're not necessarily being reactive. As I said earlier, some people will do things to try to provoke a reaction. When we react, they have control. Whenever we respond, we have control. Record time. Good evening, Darren. Still happens to me when I give myself a chance to react, so to speak. Physically writing, screening the poetry, and I have no idea what acid spitting means. I don't know, but I do know what screaming and writing poetry and so on is. Physically writing down the things that we think and the things we feel. Some people call it journaling. It's not necessarily a bad idea. It can be quite cathartic, can be quite therapeutic, can be a number of things. When we put something down on a page, you go back and you read that an hour later, following day, whatever it is, you notice that the very thing that you've written down no longer has the energy. Once you're reading it back to yourself, it doesn't have. That's why I often say people have a head like a TARDIS. It's always bigger on the inside. When it's trapped in our head, that's when it starts to get magnified, and we start to think of all the what ifs and what abouts and all the awful things that could happen, might happen, and so on. When it's down on a page, when it's written down, or you go back and you look at it, you notice it's lost its power. It doesn't have the energy it had when it was in your head. So that's a pretty good technique there, Rancor Town. Whenever you write down the things you fear, the things that bother you, the things that upset you, you even write down what you might consider to be a good idea. Because you go back and look at it, you might look at it and think, well, I saw it in a cartoon once. It's probably not going to work in real life. Or you could look at it and you could think, that is pretty good. So how do I get there from here? You don't look at that Mount Everest type thing. You start look at the steps you might have to take. So writing things down can be pretty helpful. Or we get to scroll down a bit more. PhD Jane says, check out Rebecca Manville, Covert Narcissism. Yeah, you want to put down other channels, people, books, things like that. Certainly add them. I'm happy to do that. Go ahead, do that. If YouTube has this thing, if you put it in the comment box and it's a link to a video, it probably won't let you do it because it thinks it's spam. So just put the name of the channel and the name of the channel and the name of the video, and people can do a search for it that way. But yeah, by all means, share information, share resources. That's a good idea, and thank you for sharing that, Paisley. Where do we get to now? Hello from Worcester. Hello, Worcester. Catapart. Question. Narcs that lost control of me. What do I do if they occasionally follow me around? They show up in the most inviting way. Really, I can't really give advice in specific situations. If they are following you around, there may be something about it. Depends on what kind of risk, danger you might think yourself in. You may be in a situation. This is the thing. Sometimes we can feel as if we're being followed. They're not. They're just at the same event that we're at. It can be hard to discern the difference. But if everywhere we go, they keep turning up, again, repeated patterns of behavior. If you maybe can't address that with them, if you don't feel safe or comfortable enough, maybe speak to someone who can give specific advice in those cases. Again, it depends on what it is. It could be stalking or something, in which case it's a different kind of area. Managing your own boundaries, your own expectations, your own reaction or your own responses to things like that. The person's not necessarily going to see, unless they're setting out to try to intimidate you, they can see that they're not having the effect that maybe they're hoping for. Now, some people, if they're not getting the energy, they just get bored and they will go somewhere else. It really depends on the situation. I'm sorry I can't be more help than that. It really depends on the situation. So, record hand, yeah, like catching Darren live when possible. Yeah, I said last time when I was doing this. Now, bear in mind, last time there was a terrible storm going and I lost my internet. I lost power for the rest of the evening. I didn't think I would enjoy live streams because I'm not what you'd call a natural presenter. I don't feel like one anyway. But I actually enjoy the live streams more than I do the videos. I think they're great crack because I get a bit of interaction this way. You don't get that with a video, and I don't always get to read all of the comments in the videos. Just there's so many of them, I can't keep up with them. And I do feel bad sometimes because sometimes I'll answer a question or I'll put a like or a wee heart or whatever it is, and the comment might be about 3 months old. I feel really guilty about that. They want me to react because I put up new boundaries. Yeah, when you put up new boundaries, you'll notice people will, depend on the people in your life, the toxic, difficult people in your life, they will try to cross those boundaries. That's pretty much what they did to get you into that situation in the first place. Once you start reasserting your boundaries, you might find, the way I put it, it's like a change in tactic just to do the same thing. It's worth paying attention to, and it's worth keeping your resolve. Sometimes we have to make people aware that there are consequences for crossing boundaries. Now, if we put out a consequence and it's like the nuclear option, just like the one that said earlier, the person says, you do that and I won't speak to you again. We put out something like that. If we're not prepared to follow it through, then we have just taught them that we're not serious. Or if we do something else, that's not a good consequence, but they still learned that we didn't mean it, and they will keep on trying. When you're setting boundaries, and if you're going to set consequences, and again, it depends on the person, you always make sure you're safe. You do not want to antagonize someone, that's really, really aggressively violent or something. If you set out a boundary, you have to state a consequence. You have to follow it through. If you don't follow it through, that consequence could just be a small thing. It could be, we're not doing this, we're not going there, this will be withdrawn, whatever it is. If you don't follow it through, again, they're just going to keep on going. Now, once you do follow it through, they're probably going to tell you how unfair it is and how horrible you are and how selfish you are. Again, we just need to reiterate, you were made aware of what would happen and you continued. So we just keep giving it back to them. We don't explain anything. We just keep giving it back to them. They end up having to do their own work. Where do we get to now? Again, jumps all over the place. Every time there's a new comment, it goes all over this. MT says, I like the live streams. That's good. I'm glad, MT. I'm glad you find something helpful, even if it's my ineptitude sometimes. Paisley says, spill coffee on the camera. We don't care. Do you know what? That wouldn't be the first time. I bought a camera specifically to do this. It's a wee Sony camera, and I actually did spill coffee on it. Pardon me. From Christmas. I don't know if you've noticed the change in the camera. It's because I'm having to use the actual webcam when I put a video out, because I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do to fix the camera. Closest friends, okay. Who's feeling guilty? Pushed your music stuff on channel. Okay. Sometimes I feel my family's trying to shame me, which makes me mad. Some people, I would say narcissistic types, but not exclusively narcissistic. There could be narcissism there, but where narcissism is very deeply ingrained. I think there's two things they target in people, apart from their confidence, their esteem, and so on. There's two things I believe they target whenever they're trying to coerce or manipulate or get their own way. The first thing they target is conscience. They want people to feel bad for saying no, for having boundaries, things like that. So the person feels really guilty. They've asserted a boundary, they're showing consequences, and the person's heartbroken. They're rolling about the floor in front of you, pointing at their faces, they weep. They're targeting conscience. You feel bad for doing what you needed to do. But the other thing they target as well is your fear of public opinion, what other people think. This is where, again, Stoicism can help. You recognize we don't have to like other people's opinion. Other people are going to have opinions, but other people's opinions are going to be based on what? One side of the story. Those who know you will probably know there was a bit more going on. Those who don't know you, as uncomfortable as it is, and none of us like us because we are social creatures, we have to give them permission to think what they want. It doesn't feel good. It really doesn't. Our pride, our character, things like that are being assassinated. It doesn't feel good, but we recognize that it was done for a reason, because we don't like it. So you think of those two things whenever we're being shamed, we're being guilt tripped. It's those two things. First of all, it's our conscience. And secondly, it's our fear of what other people think. What I would say is, and it's not a pleasant thing, it doesn't happen straight away. Sometimes you will lose people if there's like some kind of smear campaign or people are talking about the horrible things you do. You might lose some people. That doesn't feel good, but you will along the way find new people. Secondly, maybe not immediately, but a lot of people who may have believed what they were told, sooner or later they might see the truth for themselves, because that person just went on to behave exactly the same way with them. We can't always necessarily change that straight away, but sooner or later. Let me put it this way. We don't like unfairness. None of us like it. We like a sense of justice. We want some kind of revenge. We want decency. We want, things to work out for the good. It doesn't sit well with us when it feels like the other person wins, and the truth is sometimes they do. That's not a nice thing, but it's real life. Sometimes they do. The other person gets the house. They get a promotion. They win the lottery. It doesn't sit well because it's so bloody unfair. But I'm a big believer in the law of the harvest. You reap what you sow. Nobody wins for long. People who win, if you want to call it that, through lies and deceit and manipulation, you really think that doesn't catch up on them sooner or later? Of course it does. You plant flowers, you're going to grow flowers. You plant discord and deceit, you're going to have chaos. Nobody wins forever. Don't know if that's of any comfort to anybody, but I've been around longer than most. Well, I've been around longer than people younger than me. And that's just something I've noticed, that nobody wins forever. Going back to the Stoicism, things are momentary. They are of the moment. They're not forever. Okay. What do you say? Even if people know you, they want you to feel embarrassed for stuff they feel embarrassed about. Yeah, you don't have to feel embarrassed if you don't feel embarrassed. You're under no obligation to feel anything for anybody, or feel in the way anyone tells you to feel. You're under no obligation. You're responsible for you. Again, the things you can control, you're responsible for you. You own you. You're the expert on you, by the way. No one else is. You are. You go to see a therapist. The therapist is not the expert on you. You're the expert on you. Therapist wants to learn about you, tell me about you, teach me about you, all the rest of it, but you are the expert on you. So, plant ice, you're going to harvest wind, roll away the dew. Franklin Star by the Grateful Dead. I haven't heard from the Grateful Dead in years. Wow. These bands. I forget Record Hound. Yeah, you're familiar with some of the music I would listen to. That's right. I remember we've chatted about this previously. Okay. Don't let people tell you how you feel. People who can tell you how you feel are the same kind of people that can tell you what you think. Wow. You're clairvoyant. Really, you're psychic. Ain't gonna happen. The most we can do is pick up signals. That's it. I think the most we can do is understand how someone might think, but we will never know what they think. We might get an idea of how they feel by the way they, from their body language, their tone of voice, and things like that. But we'll never know unless they tell us. Only value opinions of people whose advice you would take. Right. Absolutely. Not sure who it was said it, but there is a quote from somebody, and I have a feeling it might be one of these Hollywood actors or something. I don't know. I can't remember. Yeah. Don't value the opinion of anyone you wouldn't ask for advice. Why would you? They're not going to necessarily tell you what you want to hear, what you need to hear. They're not necessarily going to tell you anything helpful. Yes, but we have come to the end of the time. It's just after 9. That was Stoicism in a nutshell. As I said, there's a lot of channels, there's websites, there's things you can read if you want to learn a bit more. I just went through, if you will, the key concepts and how it can help in different situations. And I gave a few ideas that you just might want to practice. Ultimately, it does come down to things like our self-discipline, building on what works, letting go of what doesn't, and maybe having to stop and reduce the things that have been holding us back. If you can cut them out straight away, by all means, go for it. If not, maybe it's going to be a little piece at a time. But pay attention. If it is something you do want to practice and learn a bit more about, you pay attention to some of the changes, some of the things you start to notice. Life around you may still go on the way it does. There's still things going on in work. There's still things going on in home. There's things going on with the next door neighbors and stuff like that. But pay attention to how you might be dealing with them. Controlling the things you can, letting go of the things you can't, or accepting the things you can. Sometimes letting go of some things as well. Letting go of something doesn't necessarily mean you don't care. Sometimes I think it's the difference between caring about and caring for. Sometimes letting go of something is recognizing the very thing you're holding on to is the very thing that's maybe been holding you back in a lot of ways. So until next time, and next time I have a topic already. It was the last time I was talking about the stuff about Freud, about the id, the superego, and so on. And it came up about dreams. Now, I was going to do it this week, but I would like to read a bit more about it because it's been a lot of years from I looked at dreams, archetypes, interpretations, and things like that. So I would like to kind of refresh myself a little before I talk about it. So if anybody's interested, next time I'm going to be talking about dreams, paying attention to our dreams. What can we learn from them? And as always, after that, I will go back to asking people for suggestions, whatever topics, as long as I could cover them. We get to is when thanks for these streams, so I'm just like chatting with others. Yeah, by all means, and chat away. By all means. Again, there is something I think about like-minded people. There's also different people. There's people in general. the things we can learn, the things we can share. Sometimes we feel good. We might get a little bit of advice, something that helped somebody else. We might get a new resource. There might be another channel out there. There might be another YouTuber. There might be a podcast that someone might find helpful. But I think there's also something quite empowering, something quite warming whenever we can share something as well. We can say to somebody, you know, you might find this helpful, or I tried that, it didn't work, or I found this useful. Yeah, by all means, no problem. Share your stuff. As I say, if you're going to use the comment section of the video here, don't put a link because YouTube will think it's spam. Put the name of it and the name of who does it, and people can find it that way. Share whatever resources you have, by all means. I'm fine with that. I'm good with that. So until next time, thanks again for watching. I hope you found this useful. Oh, and I keep forgetting to say, do please like and maybe leave a comment if you can, because that way it'll help other people to see it as well. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again. Bye now.